Call the council as a whole committee to order this evening. We'll continue with our budget hearings. This evening, Wednesday, May 26th, we have the police, city clerk, city council, license commission, and elections. We'll start with the police department on page 24. We have police personal services, $3,865,200. Total benefits and stipends, $1,569,514. Civilian staff support, $11,500. Office and supplies, $38,700. Travel and training, $36,000. Vehicle and equipment, $211,000. Total building maintenance, $221,495, for a total of $5,953,409. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening.
Would you like to comment before the council will start asking questions?
I think what you have in front of you tonight is a bare-bone budget that's really, there's not a lot of fat in it, and you can rest assured that we will scrutinize every penny in it as we did this past year. We will come up with additional plans as we did this year to try to bring additional revenue into the city as we move forward in FY11. I'm concerned about a lot of things. I'm concerned that as we move ahead in FY11, the economy gets worse, and as a result of that, police services or additional police services may be needed. It's typically when the economy's bad, police services go up, crime rises. So I'm always concerned about that. I've heard the predictions for FY12. Probably it's just as grim as the FY11 are going to be. So I'm here to answer any questions. I think we've done a lot with a lot less. In the 2 years that I've been here, this budget's been cut over $1 million. And I can assure you that public safety is, and especially the police services, are out there as much as they were the first day I came here. So we haven't cut any officers' positions out in the force, where we have just as many officers responding to calls as we did 2 years ago. It's the other duties that are missing. Some of the other things that people would like to see, officers walking the beats, officers more visible in certain areas during the course of holidays or any other time when most of our officers will take vacation time or days off. So there's a fine line that we all walk in that area, and we'll move forward. We're still focused on community policing initiatives. I met with Sergeant Jackson 20 minutes ago. We will start looking at and opening up that police substation in the Park Hill area. For one thing, to keep officers in that area so they don't have to come back to the police department, so there's more visibility in that area. For an officer to leave that sector to come back to the station is a 20-minute ordeal. If we have a substation up there, which will cost the city nothing other than out of my budget, maybe some electrical costs or heating costs, but I'm willing to absorb that because I think it's when the day's done, that having a police officer stay in those sectors are vital to the city of Fitchburg. And I think we will continue to look at that, look at the other initiatives, training initiatives that don't cost us anything, equipment, or anything that we can get to help us move the organization forward. I promise you that I will continue doing that.
Councilor Joseph.
I guess I'll be the first one to jump into the fray and say, just because you have 5 people that are retiring, that doesn't mean that you should be reduced by 5 people. Okay, that's ridiculous. That doesn't help the force. That doesn't help Fitchburg at all. It's happened. A few years ago, it was the fire department. They had people retiring, so they reduced their numbers. You have people retiring. Just because people are retiring from the police force, that doesn't mean there's not a need there for those 5 people. And as a city the size of Fitchburg, with 40,000 people, we need as many people as we can on the force for those other things like visibility, traffic, all of those things that make quality of life here in Fitchburg suffer when we don't have them. And I want to continue to emphasize to the mayor that we need those 5 people before this budget session is over. That's not an option. It's really, there's proposed ways of doing it. Councilor Di Natale's found money. We've all said there's other ways of doing it. We need to work together to find those ways. So I'm sure you're going to hear that 11 times, but I just wanted to be one of the, just to jump in. And Mike, I have a confusion on vehicles and equipment. You reduced a line by $46,000 for a mechanic, and you've only increased that by $15,000 for auto repair, and I don't get it.
Well, Counsel, a couple of things that, looking at the current vehicles that we have now, they're almost all newer vehicles that we're not spending a lot of money initially. So if we continue with the maintenance program that we're going to get into each Monday morning, the vehicle is going to be sent outsourcing to be checked for just the vitals, oil pressures, transmission fluid, ball joints, and all the things that might have gone wrong because we didn't have the equipment internally to check for ball joints or to do to change ball joints. So if we find out that the ball joints are somewhat wearing, we'd rather change them right away, saving the cost of the tires in the future. So I think we're not sure if we might need a little additional money in that area, and that's an area Robin and I just spoke about before we came here, about an area that's the only area we're not really sure about what it might cost us in addition if we outsource everything.
So do you have, are you entering a contract with somebody for $60,000?
Oh, no. It'd be case by case. If something goes wrong with the vehicle, we'll have it checked.
Oh, I thought you said you were going to have it checked every Monday morning.
We're going to have the oils checked and all the fluids checked routinely, which we would normally do anyways. That's going to continue. But this is a gentleman that's agreed to do that, like free of charge. And then if he finds something wrong as doing they check a safety check also. If they find something wrong, they're gonna let us know. We're gonna determine then where do we send the car to get fixed. Fortunately, the last two vehicles that we purchased have extended warranties. A lot of the equipment that would typically go wrong is now warranted. So we're fortunate that we purchased that the last two vehicles. The four prior vehicles. No major things have happened right now, so we're hoping that with the correct maintenance as we go throughout the year, that will reduce the major cost of those vehicles.
It seems like we're going to put out an awful lot of money where we could have saved money by doing it in-house. It's just...
We had the mechanic in-house, and most of the vehicles went out for a lot of the jobs. We did it anyways, and that was pre-me. That was before. Any major jobs were done outsourced anyways.
Councilor Connery.
Chief, on page 24, line 4, total civilian staff support. In FY10, you have $1,500, and in FY11, you have $11,500. Could you explain that, please?
Yes. Total civilian staff and support. That was when we took on an individual to maintain our alarm system. Without that person doing that job, we were going to lose revenue for the city. We bring in approximately $15,000 to $25,000 a year for that position, which we thought was well worth the investment because it was all the alarms that we go through. So that was it, and then the other portion of that is just the matron. We have matrons come in when we arrest a female.
Okay. On page 26, sir, under vehicles and equipment, line 1 and 2, mechanics and clothing allowance, does this mean that that person is going to be laid off from his job?
The job's being done away with, yes.
Being done away with. Is this person aware of this?
Yes.
He is, okay. And I have one final question. Piggybacking onto what Councilor Joseph has said. I totally agree with Councilor Joseph that we cannot afford to put anybody on the police department at this time. I heard a rumor this week that you indicated couple of weeks ago that Officer Coleman resigned. I'd like to know whether this rumor is true or not, that his salary has already been removed from the FY11 budget. Is that true?
Yes.
That is true. Okay. The final question I have is, with the 5 future officer cuts, I'd like to know where you plan to make the cuts on the department. What positions are you planning to cut?
Presently, I would have to review with my staff. I would look at typically, this is a piecemeal, so there's an officer that's gone already. We just going to replace that position on late nights. They have the same amount of officers on that shift. Calls of service are way down. We compare them to both the day shift and the early night shift. Calls of service are way down on that late night shift. So we haven't really seen any difference in the, we don't have any difference in the services that are being performed by the officers on that shift. Detective Lawrence is retiring next month. As a result of that, what I did initially, we put an extra person in the detectives this last bid in December to replace him, to get ready to replace him when he retired. So that was pre-planned. And then in January of 2011, that's when I believe the 3 officers, or at least 2 officers. Sorry?
Yes.
The 3 of the officers that are going to be retired, because they're mandated to retire, one of them is in the deputy's position right now, and 2 of them are in the detective bureau. So we'll review that as we get closer to that time, and look at is there any alternative ways to maybe increase, maybe the patrol to do something a little bit different, or combine one of the other internal jobs with that. With one of the detectives' jobs that's leaving. Or one of the detectives that are leaving, not the jobs, but the detectives that are leaving.
Well, I'd just like to say that it's really not the city council's prerogative to find the money. We can cut in various other departments, but it's the mayor's final decision as to where to place the money. I will say right now, and I'm not playing to the camera, Mayor, I will not vote for this budget unless you get those 5 positions filled. Thank you.
Mayor Wong?
I've written 2 correspondences to the council already. Fortunately, there is no pot of money to allocate money to additional police officers without dipping into stabilization. And I believe one counselor said that might be fine. So those are discussions that we can have. Other funding are available funds. The first letter, I said that there are going to be available funds that will be certified in the fall. We don't know how much that is, but given that 1 officer will be retiring in December and 2 in January, those could be funding sources for those 3 positions, which means that we would only look at Keith Culliman's position as well as the officer who's likely going to be retiring in, I believe, July 15th. So we can figure out how to resolve those issues now because that is a much smaller number. I also sent a second correspondence because I'm thinking ahead in future years, we're going to have more than these 5 officers retire. I think one of the quickest things to do would be to see if we can get the 9 officers that are currently in dispatch out on the street. I think that's been a goal of ours anyways. And if we can do that first, then we can actually get more officers and for a cheaper price than trying to replace and bring new officers on board. Then that gives us time to plan ahead, to add more officers. You know, if they're not lateral transfers and we have to send them to academy, again, given the needs of the city, I would rather get officers that are already on board, that already know the city, get them out on the street as quickly as possible. So again, it's not a perfect solution. I know you'd like to say that this is exactly the money that I'll use for those positions. There is probably money that can be reallocated within the budget, but again, the budget is actually no longer in my hands. Had this discussion occurred a few weeks ago, you know, probably would have looked at that. But right now, we'll have to wait until we see what money from the budget the council cuts before I can put out a supplemental budget. I don't think I can put out a supplemental budget saying, here's X number of dollars that you've cut without knowing what you're going to do. But knowing that we have 2 officers that are either have vacant positions or going to be vacant, and knowing that there's 3 that we've got about 7 or 8 months for, I would say let's figure out how to address those 2. Let's figure out how to get the 9 officers back on the street, and then, you know, maybe we don't have to replace those the 3 officers that are retiring in December and January, because we've gotten a few officers and we have officers back on the street, which is actually more than what you're recommending that I have on the police force. So again, not a perfect plan. Be a more perfect plan if we didn't get cuts from the state, but we are working very hard to try and figure out how to solve this issue. And as I stated in all my correspondences, this is a top priority. That's why we looked at the mechanics. I mean, that's why we looked at non-public safety positions to cut. That's why we saved $120,000 through the Community Development Department. Again, we're looking at all those other areas, trying not to cut police or fire or public works, as was stated by the council during this session and previous sessions.
President, if I just may have one follow-up question.
Certainly.
I know it's non-related, but have we received the 40R money from the state?
We will be receiving that funding shortly after July 1st. So the state has confirmed that we will get the money.
Thank you.
Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really just a couple of comments. First of all, I wasn't here last night, but I watched the meeting. And I think it was Councilor Connery had brought up the fact that to dip into stabilization to hire some officers. Well, I think stabilization has got to be one of the most important things that we have in dire times. That's what that money's for. And I would like it to possibly be considered to use some of that money to at least make up for those 5 positions. And over the past 4 fiscal years, the city's total budget has actually increased only by $100,000. The police department budget has been reduced by $1.85 million over 4 years. It's 24%. That is eye-opening, especially in the type of city that we live in. You know, my daily job, I see a lot of the results. Just wanted to make that statement. $1.85 million in 4 years cut. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
I want to add to that statistic, a more startling statistic is 10 years ago, the city was spending $4.8 million on health care. This year, we're spending $12.8 million. 10 years ago, we spent $11 million in public safety. This year, we're spending $11 million. So you want to know where the increases are going? They're going to health care. And that's, why, again, one of the biggest reasons why all the mayors and I have been lobbying the state, so far unsuccessfully, but we're going to continue to lobby the state to give us plan design. I know it's something that's unpopular by the unions, but I know Gardner, I was talking to them recently, they could save $500,000 today if they could do that. We could definitely save over $1 million, even closer to $2 million if we had that right. Again, a right that the state already has, and if we're unsuccessful with the state, we certainly will probably look at putting it on the ballot. But again, an important issue, $8 million increase over the past 10 years and a $0 increase in public safety. So again, definitely what I would call a budget buster.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've already been on record saying that I'm voting against this budget because, not only because of the police layoff positions not being filled, but because I believe, once again, that the budget as presented to the council and the public is a misrepresentation of where the money really should be. With that said, the police department budget, for me, is the #1 budget of the city. It is no secret to me and to anybody else that economic engines are fueled by the crime rates in the cities. If the crime rate in the city is not very good, that will deter people from coming here. It'll create a perception of fear and a perception of negative thinking. The message this budget sends is, oh well. Now, some may say, like a private company, if you don't have the money, you lay them off or you don't fill the positions. But for the police department, That should be a sacred cow, especially for a city that has the drug and gang problem that we still have. While crime went down 4%, and your men and women should be commended for that, there's no reason now to just slack off with it in terms of staffing. 3 years, I have advocated that we make cuts in this budget, giving the mayor, the mayor just mentioned, and this is what I've been saying for 3 years, and she just said it just now, for us to make the cuts if we choose, so it'll be possible for her to give a supplemental budget. That's what I'm trying to do. Public safety or free cash. I don't care. The bottom line is this represents what is truly needed in departments. We're going to have the Treasury Department before us. Wait till we see those budgets. We're going to have the employee benefits budget that has tons of money left over every year. 3 years ago, in 2008, there was a cruiser issue. I sat in this chair for 6 meetings and I said, it's only going to cost $100,000 for 5 or 6 new 4 new cruisers, excluding grants. I got a lot of resistance for that. As soon as the budget was passed, 2 weeks later, the mayor submitted an order saying, oh, we have the money for the cruisers all of a sudden. What a surprise. So when I make recommendations for cuts, you can bet the bank that those cuts are real. We may have $2 million left over at the end of the year. All I've ever advocated for, Chief, and to the other departments, is that we make some effort of reinvestment into these departments. There is nothing against spending $200,000 or $300,000 out of over $2 million to supplant what you need. No one's ever advocated we spend everything. Just a little bit. I'm not voting for this because of those reasons. And I am pleased that the mayor cut out the mechanic's job. I made a recommendation we cut that job last year because I heard from the officers and from high-level ranking officers in the department that we already farm out this stuff. So why are we employing someone with health care and benefits and all that if we're already farming out a lot of our services? What I'm not happy to see is that while we cut over $47,000 in that position, we didn't move that money to one of the positions that we are losing. And I have a problem with that too. So, yes, in the interest of fairness, I'm a bad person, I guess. Because for me, I don't care what departments get cut, as long as yours and maybe 2 others are kept above acceptable levels that need to operate this city. Because we are not going to get out of this financial upheaval unless we have strong anti-crime prevention techniques. You're talking about 2 guys that retired from the Detectives Bureau. Because of reorganization and consolidation, there's a lot of officers doing 50 different things. Now that you're losing 2 more out of the Detectives Bureau, I don't understand how you're going to function. So, this is a big problem. And I hope come the end of these sessions, when we have a list of cuts to make, the council can sit here and say to themselves, and they can tell the public that the budget we were presented with, we gave the mayor the option to allocate money to public safety or to other important initiatives. And if the mayor doesn't want to do that, that's fine with me. I can sleep well at night knowing that I gave her the option to do it. And she chose not to, or hopefully she chooses to. But that's where we're going with this. So I'm very upset to see how this looks. Because we can't do it anymore. We can't. Cruisers or bodies. It's very disappointing. So throughout the rest of the budget proceedings, I'll continue to make cuts. And hopefully some of that gets moved to public safety. Hopefully a lot of it gets held in case we need it. But the letter that the mayor gave us last night for the $300,000, I agree with the mayor on the need to consult, to centralize dispatching. But we heard the fire chief a few days ago say that he didn't have glowing things to say about it for many reasons. I think that's kind of a stall tactic letter. I want her to keep pursuing that. I want you and the chief to keep pursuing it, but at the same time, it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to take years for that to happen. We need to do something about this now. So, my last point is, we hear about, one question to you is, what is the, how many gangs do we have in this city? Do we know that operate in this city?
Gangs that I'm concerned about versus neighborhood kids that gather and may call themselves a gang, probably about 4 gangs that we consider that we're monitoring.
Okay, do we have,
Probably 100 people that we're concerned about. Majority of those gang individuals, though, are probably over the age of 20, without saying too much on camera.
Yep.
That it's not like your neighborhood gangs that you're thinking about, or some of the kids. You know, we just realized in this past 6 months, I'm not sure if the whole council realized, or not the last 6 months, the last three months, is that we arrested an individual that was responsible for probably 80% of the graffiti in the city. He wasn't a gang member. He wasn't even living in the city. He worked in the city, and he came around and just graffiti. Everybody thought it was gang. It was just a kid's initials, and then we found that he's involved with 2 other kids. Here's a Ripley, believe it or not. The judge sentenced him to 8 months in jail. The next day, we arrest the gentleman with a handgun in his possession after we get called up to the Summer Street area for shots fired in the early morning hours. An officer rolls up to an individual, he sees him, grabs him real fast, finds the handgun on him. The next day, he was released on personal recognizance. So that's the difference in issues that we see in the city. We have a guy with a gun, and we caught with a gun, he's released. Even though I applaud the judicial system for holding this graffiti artist, for doing that, because he himself could have caused havoc in the city and was causing havoc in the city. And if you really look, and I hate saying things, but in the last few months, we haven't had that much new graffiti around, because we've actually captured the person. So I think when you talk about gangs and you talk about drugs and violence, I think that's one breath, and I think there's some initiatives that are in place that we are focusing on that.
there is a perception problem, obviously, in this city. I live on Main Street, I've lived there for over 3 years now, and I'm still alive. You know, there are some people in the city who feel like, I'm not going to say it on camera, they feel like they're very nervous. You know, it's just a perception thing that I don't understand.
But they feel that way because of certain reasons, and you know, that's just the reason they feel that way.
And to combat that, the way to combat that is not to reduce your staff any further than what it's been reduced.
It's having officers on the street.
And the last point I'll make is, I agree with the mayor about health plan design. I couldn't be more supportive of her initiative and the other mayors to go after the state for this, because it is essential, it is needed. Because we've been told by the MMA it'll save over $100 million across the cities and towns. The treasurer showed me a list of all the options that we could take if we had that authority, and it would cut millions. But I also understand why unions do not approve of it. But like the mayor said, you know, the state workers are all on that kind of an option. I think it should be uniform across the board. If the state legislature is going to have the state employees do that, then we should make it uniform across the board. I think an entity, a business, should have control over what health and plans they provide, given what it's costing. To save jobs, to preserve jobs, is what the goal always is, for me. And I'm sure it is for the mayor. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief, page 25, under stipends, I noticed a stipend for the school resource officer. The upcoming fiscal year, where do we stand in your budget with a school resource officer?
I'm hoping to maintain both officers in the schools.
Okay.
It's very important to me personally and to the organization as we grow. And we talk about youth violence and gangs. There's no better bang for your dollar than having officers in the school talking about those initiatives. We will maintain them.
Bullying is a hot topic, and it's some of the stories are absolutely horrifying.
I went to the high school a few weeks ago, and I was astonished at the amount of respect, the amount of knowledge that Officer Jackson has with those kids up there, and the kids that know him personally and came up to him. Just in the short time I was there, talking to him, you can't get that future prevention of crime by those actions. And that's what we're doing. We're investing in tomorrow, today, by having those officers in the schools.
No question. Is it coming out of, where does it come out of your budget? Does it come out of the school budget? Or
My budget.
are we getting grants?
No, my budget.
Your budget. Thank you, Chief.
Council Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, Chief.
Evening.
I guess this question might be directed more to the mayor, and that's the college incentive of the famous term Quinville. I know the state withdrew their obligation approximately a year ago, meaning the city picked up not only our share, we maintained our share of the Quinville, but is it true we picked up what the state normally reimbursed us, correct?
Correct. It's been a long time, many, many, many years, I can't tell you how many, since the state has met their obligation to fund 50% of that.
Okay, but they were at least paying 25% up until about a year ago, was that my understanding, when they finally eliminated it?
Yeah.
Rose, you know the
Some were
exact-
just under like half, I think. I think it was about half, wasn't it?
Right, they were paying about
40%,
40%,
somewhere around
weren't
there.
they?
Yeah,
And
40%.
And I believe it's now 5%?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. And I think they've eliminated that completely. My question is, when does the contract with the police department run out so that that issue can be readdressed? Because we're really being penalized, not only with the increase of the health care for the entire city going up, and I guess that's not the police department fault, but we have picked up the state share of the Quinville, which is coming out of your budget, I believe.
Correct.
Are they not?
Correct.
So we're losing money, unfortunately, or we're losing men and women on the street because a large amount of that budget has now gone towards picking up the state share of the Quinville. And that isn't the city's problem, or it isn't the city's fault. It's our problem because we've picked it up. The end result is the police department has lost men on the street because that comes off your budget, correct? So rather than put 3 or 4 people on the street, you have to put it towards the Quinville. It comes out of your budget, does it not?
Correct.
All right.
I think to kind of answer that in the best light is that this has been a negotiation that's taken years to receive. And for me to sit in front of you and saying, oh, let's just wipe away 10 or 15 or maybe 20 years of negotiation and realize the most important thing about that my officers have purchased houses and had families based on that salary. And I would think that would probably be the last thing I would ever think of reducing right now. I would continue looking at grants, other grants to increase the manpower here, other initiatives as I have, other than looking at to reduce the so-called educational incentive. Because the disappointing thing, there's other departments in the Commonwealth that do receive an educational incentive, seeing that they might have been aware enough to change wording many years ago. I don't think we should be penalized because we just went with the system and everybody took the system at its word at the time.
My next question, Chief, is on page 25. Under the federal grant, typed in red, the 911 support grant, the JAG recovery grant, and the EOPS grant, is any of that money, the end result being men being hired?
That's sustainment right now.
All right, is that over and above the 57.5 officers?
No.
So that amount of money merely maintains the 57.5? There's no over and above that number, correct? Okay, thank you. That's my only question. Thank you.
If I could just have a follow-up to Council Solomito talking about the Quinn bill. While I agree with you, Chief, wholeheartedly, that I think it's inappropriate to take something away that has been earned and that people have and have based their family and their life and their mortgage and all of that on, is it possible in the future, and maybe this would be to the mayor or to you, through negotiations with the union, to change it for folks who are coming onto the department, so they don't have that expectation and they don't have anything taken away, the same way we negotiated last year with the fire department, and the new people coming onto the fire department don't get all the same benefits that the others had. Is that something we can look to in the future?
I think Chris can attest to the fact that we've already been talking about that. We were a long ways off from hiring new officers, so we still have time to discuss that. I think the issue right now is we're not quite sure that we can actually negotiate that because it is state law. The Quinn bill is state law, so.
So it's a state law that the state doesn't pay for?
Correct. It's a very minimally funded mandate rather than a unfunded mandate.
Okay.
So there's existing union contracts out there that actually state that if the state reduces their share, then the city can reduce their share or the payment to the officers, and even that is currently being contested right now. So a couple things. We don't want to get into a situation where we're not paying something that we might owe, and then, spend that money and then have to owe that money later. So we don't want to get into that position. We've also been advocating for the state to make a decision on the Quinn bill, keep it or lose it. And I do also want to point out that the fire department, through a municipal agreement, has an educational incentive anyways. Their educational incentive is actually stronger than the police department because it's in their contract. It exists. So that was something that had been previously negotiated by another set of executive and legislators. There's a history of that. I guess the last thing I want to leave it with is we really need to look at the overall salaries. And so sometimes when you're looking at let's say a $60,000 salary, and you might say, well, the base pay is $45,000 and the incentives equal $15,000. And the question that we need to look at is, what should the salary for a police officer, what should it be? Should it be $60,000? And if it should be $60,000, then that's what we want to put into the budget. If it's if it's $45,000 with $15,000 worth of stipends, or if it's $60,000 flat pay, I think that's something that we should discuss. So taking away the Quinn bill, the way that it's situated, it's up to 25% of somebody's pay. If we take that away, then you're talking about salaries here being way off of the salaries in surrounding communities. And is that, are we going to start losing officers because of that? So these are just a lot of different considerations that we're looking at. I would personally want us to have an argument first of what do we think officer pay should be in Fitchburg, period, and then let's take into consideration state law and so on so that we can keep those salaries in that range to compensate officers for the work that they do, but also to be as competitive as we can be to attract the quality of officers and to retain the quality of officers.
Thank you. Councilor Caddy.
Chief, explain 57 and a half officers. I know there's an explanation. We don't have a half officer, so...
It's just a number.
Yeah, it's just a number. We actually right now have 59 at this very moment because Officer Coleman resigned. We did have 60, now we're down to 59. In July, Detective Lawrence is leaving. That takes us down to 58. It's actually 56 and a half, not 57 and a half. That takes us down to 58.
So only budget for half a year, that's what you're figuring?
Correct,
All
because
right.
the other 3 are going to be here for half a year, so 3.5 years, 1.5. So that's how we can figure that out.
Okay. When's the last time we hired?
Wow.
New hire? That was previous.
4 years ago?
4 years.
4.
Something to remember, and correct me if I'm wrong. An officer has 5 years on the job, he has 14 days vacation. 10 years, he has 21. 15 years, he has 28. And 25 years, he'll have 35.
I don't do the
Okay.
holiday
I'm
vacation.
pretty sure that's a fact. Has that changed?
5 is 3 weeks. 4
Okay.
is 4 weeks. 10 is 4
Okay, so it finally gets to the 35 days. Then if an officer doesn't call out sick, I believe they've negotiated a day and a half personal,
Yeah.
which adds another 17 days a year. As your department ages, the men working get more benefits. So the older your department, the more benefits those men have. So when you have 56 and a half officers, and those guys have 52 days legally coming to them, 52 vacation days legally coming to them, you don't have 57 officers working anymore. You start accumulating those numbers, it skyrockets.
Well, true, but a lot of the older officers that, they're in the detective bureau or the drug unit, and if they take days off, they don't get replaced. So,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah.
Yeah,
so
I
it's not
understand.
really like that's an extra benefit. it's
But
time
but
to
you
take
do,
off.
but as your department ages, those benefits start to
Time
accumulate.
off, Yes.
And you talked about calls for service are down 11 to 7, but the point is, if you have one major crime at 1 o'clock in the morning, it's going to take 2 to 3 officers and your street sergeant. That leaves 2 men for the rest of the city. And you know that.
That's a problem. Just the other
problem.
night, we had 8 officers at 1:30 in the morning, 2 streets away from here. 8 officers. We're fortunate we had 8 officers working. It's just also, during the years of negotiation, either through prior administrations, that one thing I've learned, and I've learned in the last few years, that we should never negotiate extra time off in lieu of giving pay, because what that really does, it increases us spending much more to replace them in overtime. So that's something we always have to be cognizant of. And fortunate or unfortunate, for me, fortunate for the officers, they get a lot of time off here in the police department. But also unfortunate for them, they'd rather have it, I'm not speaking on behalf of the union, but I know a lot of them would rather have it in their salaries instead of having the time off. But that was something that was negotiated over the course of the years that we now live with. And it's tough to fill those shifts sometimes. And, it's always, well, you can change the way we give time off. But it wouldn't be fair to the officers that have worked and negotiated that to get the time off. So it's what do you do? So that what we do is we maintain and we move forward. And we make sure that as we move forward the organization and negotiate, that we always think ahead in those negotiations, not at that present time.
Chief, how many people do we have working in the Detective Bureau?
Right, presently, 4.
And that would be a sergeant?
Yeah.
And 3
we have
patrolmen.
3 officers. That's the typical, we have the 4th now, but we put that 4th one in to replace Buzzy when he was retiring next month, or 2 months from now. So it's typically a sergeant and 3 officers, sergeant and 3 officers in the...
When you came on, I believe we had a lieutenant, a sergeant, and 4 patrolmen. And then you had 1 sergeant in the drug unit and 3 patrolmen, maybe 4
Okay.
at the time. Councilor Connery asked you earlier about a plan. Detective Lawrence is technically already left. Coleman left. You've got another retirement in December and 2 more in January. And when Councilor Connery asked you, I know you don't know. I know you don't know, because you don't know where you're going to take those men from. I mean, do you take them from patrol? Do you take them from the Detective Bureau? Do you start taking them out of the drug unit? I mean, you're going to lose 5 men, and that's what we do know. Tomorrow, someone could have a problem and leave the job tomorrow morning.
Correct.
Someone could decide to retire early and be gone tomorrow morning. The point is if our manpower goes down, it takes so long for the hiring process, it takes so long to get those people through the academy, you're not going to see a body for a full year.
Actually, 18 months.
18 months. I think, well, one more thing to say. I don't want to miss, I wrote down some notes. I heard the mayor say a few minutes ago, we're a long time from hiring new officers. So she's already got it in her mind that she's not going to be hiring new officers. I think she's 100% wrong. I was here working in Fitchburg during Proposition 2.5, when we had 2 police officers working the street one night. It was absolutely terrible. And I can remember back then, the burnout rate was unbelievable. I heard Councilor Joseph talk about giving out citations, the patrol officers giving out citations. Some nights you just jump from call to call to call, arrests, reports, arrests, call. The last thing on your mind is giving out a speeding ticket, trust me. I'm really worried that we can't convince the mayor that it's time to hire. I mean, do you know how many men you had when you started compared to how many men you have now?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Could you tell me what that is?
Yep. I started with total complement 91 91 total complement from the chief down. We have total complement right now today 74.
And you're going to lose 5 more.
We're going to lose 4 more.
4 more, so we're going to go
Down
from...
to 7.
So in your
Total
tenure,
complement. Correct.
your 3-year tenure, you're going to go from 91 down to 70.
Correct.
If you go back on page 25, your overtime account, it was cut by $100,000. I can't even fathom that if you're going to go down 4 more officers for a total of 21 officers in 2 years, that you could actually cut out $100,000 in overtime. I expect that you're not going to make the end of the year next year.
I don't think that we're going to make the end of the year, this next year. The reason that it shows 100,000 is because we asked for that extra 100. We did originally have 400 in FY10.
Yeah.
We needed, you know, we don't know if we're going to spend all that, but that's why it shows the negative 100 right now.
Yeah.
But we don't think that we're going to make the next fiscal year, and we're expecting at some point that we'll have to come back to council.
And a comment about Officer Jackson. The things I hear in the city about him is spectacular, just so that you know. And lastly, what still bothers me about the department is Lieutenant Swears, Sergeant LeMay, and Sergeant Giannini. And we created a deputy chief's position, and we were told that we would see these positions return. That was last month, and here we are now, and we haven't seen those positions return. I think it's very unfair to those officers. And then lastly, just for your information, you probably already heard, in Boston today, an off-duty police officer got into a motorcycle accident, and an on-duty motorcycle officer responding to the accident got into an accident going to the call, which brings back last night. That's my worry about motorcycles, the liability. And when you're going to come down to 74 officers and one of those guys get hurt on a motorcycle, it's going to hurt. And you know, I mean, it's going to hurt anyway. The guy got hurt, but
Well, it's always on my mind, the safety of the officers each and every day. One of the things I think about before I go to bed and when I wake up in the morning, that I didn't get a call that something happened.
and I hope it never happens. Trust me.
We all
I
hope
it.
that.
But Chief, unless the mayor changes her mind, I can't see myself supporting this budget, reducing your department by 4 more guys and going down from 91 officers to 70 in 3 years. I think that's terrible. The crime in this city can turn so fast, and the burnout rate of officers, it's terrible. And when the criminals start taking over the streets, it takes an awful long time to get it back. And I think we're getting very close to that. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
There's just a couple things. I said that when I started talking with the union about reducing new officer pay, we were then a long way off from hiring new officers. Not that we are today a long way off from hiring new officers, especially considering I just probably spent about 5 to 10 minutes of this session discussing ways in which we can hire new officers. I mean, it was the day after I submitted a letter to the council stating that public safety was a top priority and I want to look at available funds to fund police officers. I was told that I wasn't listening. So you're trying to get me to change my mind when my mind has already been changed. I am committed to looking at ways to hire 5 new police officers, but I can't do it unilaterally because the funding sources are not as straightforward than if we just had a pile of money sitting around. We are going to have to make choices on where that funding is going to come from, whether it's going to come from a reallocation, whether it's going to come from stabilization, whether it's going to come from available funds. We also, again, have the choices of whether we want to look at returning the 9 officers back on the street or hiring new. So these are all things that I want to have an open discussion with the council about, because there are different strategies. So for example, let's say we came up with $300,000. Do you use the $300,000 to hire civilian dispatchers and return officers to the street, or do you use it to hire new officers? Also, considering that discussions have been started, but they haven't been completed, we haven't completed negotiations on what the new pay scale will be for officers. If we hire new officers, then I would say, you know, let's let's try and save some money. That's what we did with the fire department. We saved a lot of money, not just on the pay, but on the benefits, reducing days off and things like that. So you had stated very clearly that that is a major issue, and we do want to address that when we look at bringing new officers on board. So what I'm saying is that I support what you want to do. Just because it hasn't been done already, or I haven't figured out the best way to do it, doesn't mean that I'm not committed to returning officers on the street. The correspondence I also gave to the council before the budget session started included every department and a 5-year previous history of all the staffing. So that talks about the police numbers that the chief just gave you, but it also shows other departments and has shown that there has been decline across the city. So, I know that, for example, the Public Works department hasn't been debated, but that's always another area that people say, we need more people, and so on. So, again, when funding is identified, just based on what I'm hearing that, 5 officers is a top priority. But if I gave you an alternative that said, for the same amount of money, we could get more officers on the street, I think that's legitimate and a good thing for me to put on the table for you to consider. Again, giving you guys choice as well.
Chief, if I could follow up on Councilor Caddy talking about the overtime account. I don't want to get into a detailed discussion, but last night you were before the Finance Committee about the revolving fund for traffic. And I agreed with everything that Officer McNamara pointed out regarding traffic, and I agreed that it would make the city safer and that it may be cost-effective. My question is that if your overtime account were to be increased by X, and you were to use that increase solely for those individuals who want to do overtime for traffic enforcement, do you believe that the amount of money generated through tickets, citations, whatever you want to call them, would exceed the amount of money that we would need to put into the overtime account to do that?
Yes.
Double it? Ballpark?
I think you can, I think when you look at numbers, and I'm not one to forecast the future, because knowing my luck, each night we would have officers out there for the next 2 months, it would snow out or rain in the middle of the summer. So I really don't like to do that. But generally, it doubles the amount of the cost. If the cost is $1,000 for officers, they would typically bring in $2,000.
My point being that I believe that is a way to achieve what you're looking to do without having the revolving fund be within the police department. And if we give you $100,000 and at the end of next year you've generated $200,000, then we know it worked. If we give you $100,000 and you only generate $52,000, then we know that it doesn't work that way. And if that's the case, it's not going to work that way, or it's not going to work with a revolving fund. Councilor Reynolds.
Hello, Chief. Just an aside, where is the amount that comes from your budget to the supply the Quinn bill reflected in these figures?
Page 25.
Incentive line? And the total amount there is what?
$775,000.
$775,000. That's a huge amount within your budget, isn't it? It's a sizable portion. Wow. Okay, back to, you say at the moment you have 74 officers, including yourself, 74 personnel, is that correct?
Correct.
And of the 74, how many are women?
6, maybe? 6.
And what is the highest ranking woman?
She's a sergeant right now,
Yes, her name?
Linda Swears.
And how many other sergeants have you?
We have 10 sergeants.
And is Sergeant Swears receiving the same amount of money as the other 9?
I have no idea.
Could you ask?
It's the same.
She is getting,
Well, let me clarify that.
Pay the sergeant's pay.
No, she might be getting Quinn Bill.
Well,
She might
yeah.
have a master's degree, she might have a bachelor's degree, she might have an associate degree, or she may have no degree. I just don't have that information in front of me right now.
is there any inequity that you see in the situation with Sergeant Swears? Is there any inequity? Have others,
What page?
either of her rank, been demoted and then restored, and she was not? Or do you see any inequity in the situation of Sergeant Swears? I noticed over here that
Can you tell me what page you're looking at so I can...
no, it's in general. As I understand it, others were getting an increase and she is not. A 15% increase, let's say, or higher pay than she is.
I just don't think I'm prepared to answer that question right now, and I'm not sure what relationship to the budget that has right now. I'm just not sure why you...
Well, it has to do with fairness, and when we talked about the Quinn bill, I heard it bantered about here quite a bit, that it was unfair to take away something that people already have, and so I certainly think that it's unfair to take away anything that these police officers might have without restoring it first, before you go on to other things. Having said that, what is the age of the people that are retiring from the police department?
I'd rather not get into particulars on this floor. If needed be, I would ask the HR department to, I'll ask Mr. Stevens to send that to you.
Thank you. And may I particularly ask what age you are?
Yeah, I'm 56.
And at what age might you retire?
65, 70?
So I see that you haven't, perhaps that would be from Fitchburg, and then perhaps you would retire from Fitchburg at that, whatever point you choose to. I'm just wondering what compensation you would be getting when you retire. I'm also looking at the new position of deputy chief and the amount of money he's receiving, and when he retires, what his compensation might be.
You would have to ask the retirement board.
You have to ask the retirement board. But I think it's important for the city to know.
That's based on formulas.
Right.
That's set by state law, and I think you have to, I'm just directing you to the right people. I don't have any idea about me personally, never mind the 74 officers that work for me, because that's something that happens that day. When you go before the retirement board, they look at the numbers that you have presented over the career.
Well, I bet everybody that's within a decade of retiring knows the figures or amounts of money that he might be likely to receive when he retires. It's just dealing with life. Well, what I'm looking at is, I see that you have an increase. Is that by contract that you were increased?
Correct.
Yeah, and it is by contract, will you receive more next year?
No. Next year?
Yes.
No.
No. This is the last year that you would be receiving that increase? Okay, thank you.
Councilor Conrad.
Yes, I'd like to go back to make a comment. I am very supportive of the initiative to put the dispatches all together. I think the concern I have is that we've been talking about it for so long. Nothing has moved. I believe, Chief, you were at a meeting that I was at with the Montechusett Regional Planning Commission when you first came here. And, nothing has happened on that end. I would hope that this could be moved fairly rapidly, but I heard it from across the room that it really can't. And this is an administrative function. And I was on a committee, now off a committee, but I really think that I'd like to make a suggestion, if I may, that some type of a committee be formed to include the unions of both the police and fire, somebody, one or two people from the council, and some business people, and see if we can't move this thing along, because it's probably going to take 2 or 3 years. And, we're talking about a budget that starts in a month. So there's no solutions in this budget, and I'd be willing to say there'll be no solutions in the next budget. But I highly endorse that. Thank you.
Councilor Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess this is a a question more to you, Mr. President. When you talked about the overtime, and I'm just maybe looking at it in a negative connotation, if we were to give the police department an increase in overtime with the idea that the money would be used for traffic enforcement, the end result hopefully being more income coming into the city. One problem that I see, would traffic enforcement for the most part be limited to patrolmen?
Yes.
Therefore, if we give an extra $100,000
Overtime.
to the police department for overtime, I think there's going to be a problem with the superior officers saying, we're not going to get any of that. Realistically, I think that may be a problem. Unfortunately, and I think I'm saying that in a very unfortunate manner, the superior officers are going to say, these $100,000, we're going to want some of that for our own overtime. We're not going to, and they'd be excluded from that. And unfortunately, I think that might be an end result, is that if you, when we exclude.
We're planning to use that as a detail, at detail rate versus overtime rate. So that's why if you were to give me the overtime, and that opens the door to say, well, we got to do something else with that this time because we just had an ice storm. So we're going to use all that, and the initiative dies. Whereas if we had a revolving account, that we just don't pay officers to work details. We also, as that account increases, we are able to buy equipment related to traffic initiatives. And I think that's the most important part of it, is that it's a bigger picture. It's making people aware that, in fact, when you come to Fitchburg, you obey the traffic laws, and because there's going to be officers out there. Versus if we just looked at an overtime rate, and I never thought of it that, but I thought of it initially, maybe years ago, that if we put it as an overtime, everybody would be working, captains would be working, because it's that captain's rate then. So there has to be some type of structure and guidelines in place, and that's why we ask for a revolving account versus overtime.
Chief, and the last question going on to the overtime. About 4 months ago, I got a report from the police department breaking down the overtime of every officer who worked for the last 5 months. And went from patrolman right to deputy chief in what they made. The last 3 or 4 overtime accounts I get merely breaks down overtime in what they get paid for, not including court time, not including training, but they merely break it down for overtime. Could we be made aware on a regular basis a breakdown of patrolmen, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and deputy chief? No. Only for the purpose of, I have this fear that a lot of the overtime money, and I've talked to a number of the officers, that a lot of the overtime money is being taken by the superior officers, and I'm not condemning them, but I kind of like to think that money's going to go to the officers on the street, as compared to superior officers, the lieutenants, and the captains, and the deputy chief. Could we be made aware or get a breakdown? And I don't want to know the names of every officer, but the lieutenants made X amount of money on overtime. The sergeants made X amount of money on overtime. The deputy chief made so much money on overtime. And then the patrolman made X amount. So that we can see that the money for the people on the street, the vast majority should be going there. I hope it will go there.
I think
That'd be
two things,
unrealistic.
I'll ask, we'll confer with that in the morning, Robin and I. So I think that's something, I actually had to get the figures over here with Brian when I wanted the overtime amounts. So I'll talk to Brian also. But I think one of the things that I did in the last year and a half is I realized that we didn't have a lot of supervision out there in the street with officers. And I equate that to when I was looking at it a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was a lot, I'm not saying an awful lot of complaints, but complaints come in with officers that I was concerned about. Then when you looked at each case, there wasn't a supervisor that went to a lot of the calls. Well, I stopped that. I streamlined the organization where I had more supervisors on the street. And during the vital times from 3 p.m. to 3 a.m., I almost want a sergeant on the street at all times, because those are the important hours for us liability-wise, that something can go wrong. So you might have seen an increase in the sergeant area, in the areas of sergeants getting some more overtime. It was because they never did, they never worked, they were working other places in the department, where now most of them do work out in the street.
But could we get a breakdown, not by name, merely by rank?
We have to create something like that. It's not a standard thing that we do, so I'm,
Well, the breakdown that we get merely says overtime, not by rank.
yeah.
By names?
No, I don't want it by name, merely by rank. I mean, I don't want to know what Lieutenant A or Lieutenant B makes, that isn't my issue. But how much money is being spent on lieutenants, how much is
Versus
being by, right,
I'd
sergeant.
have to create
as
something
compared-
like that. I'd have to create something for that.
Could it be done? And I'm not asking for another, you know.
You ask
I-
for that in addition every pay period? Or just every now and then to get a look at what it would be?
Once a month, maybe? Is there that much overtime going out at the door? I
Well,
think
it's just
that,
like, yeah, but-
now I'm thinking how much money overtime, that if we can't get an update on it, there must be millions of dollars going out in overtime.
No, it's nothing to keep
I
it
would
updated,
think-
it's just an extra.
I would think that Brian, the Treasury Department, has something, because when I asked, it was kind of readily available, so I'll check with Brian in the morning. I think there may be something that he has, or he just does routinely. I think on our end of the house, we don't do that. I think as it comes over here to the City Hall, it does.
Counselor, I have a little something that it's not, I mean, it's not, all gussied up like the other stuff that I do for the overtime, that helps me to balance when I do payrolls. If that's okay for you to look at.
Right, just an approximate percentage, if 24% is going toward the lieutenant, or 40% is going to lieutenant and 18% is going to patrolman, that's what I think the council may want to look in and say, wow, the chiefs are being paid, not the chief, but the upper echelon is getting the vast majority of the money. Is that what we really want, or do we want the people in the cruisers?
Well, I would think if that was in fact happening, I'd be having a knock on my door by the union president. We talk about a lot of these issues all the time.
Right.
And if that's happening, I probably would have been told that. I haven't been told that, so I'm always assuming that equality and fairness is paramount in this organization. I think that's a standard that I live by, and I think that's something that the union asked me to live by that.
I mean, is it possible just to get that breakdown percentage?
We'll work on it for you.
18%, 20%?
We'll work on it for you.
right,
But
thank you.
just so you know that supervisors can get supervisor-created overtime. Patrol gets
I know that.
patrol-created.
Created overtime.
Well, I'm just saying supervisors can't take patrol overtime.
I realize that.
Yeah, okay.
Counselor Caddy.
Chief, when we went to civilians dispatches years ago, there was a thought that we were going to save money, and what in fact happened, they unionized, they started getting the same benefits that the police officers got, they ended up getting percentage raises, and in the very end, with the turnover of the dispatchers, it ended up a wash. Has anyone ever thought of contract services, hiring an agency to perform the dispatch duties so that you don't get into a situation where you're paying these huge benefits?
We spoke about that 2 weeks ago, when we started talking about combining both police and fire, and we haven't found somebody that can do that do it professionally. I don't think there is a group of people that would do that would come into an organization and handle X amount of calls per year, even though there's outsources for security cameras. I know there's global things that, from this office, we can watch things happen in, Idaho. But I think when you look at calls for service, that I haven't found an organization or business that does that. And I don't know if, when you look at the content of the calls, we just don't want a computer answering a call that somebody's in distress. I think there has to be a person that listens to that. So I think it's more personal. But we've looked at that, Counselor, and that's still something that we, if we found something, that we would definitely, I know just a couple of weeks ago we spoke about this, but we would look at that as an alternative.
Thank you.
We've had to look at other states, because in Massachusetts, if towns do not have their own dispatch, then they're either sourcing it out to the sheriff's office or the state police. So right now, there is no private company that's out there that actually does this in Massachusetts. And we talked to both of those entities, and at this point in time, believe they stated that they didn't have the resources to take on our dispatch. But that would be ideal. And the towns that seem to be the most happiest with outsourcing are those that are doing it to the state police. That seems to be working pretty well. But again, we've talked to them, and they said they just don't have the resources to take us on board. Any change is actually going to require some cost to the city in terms of equipment. EOPS is, they will help us move the system, move the lines, and so on, but any system that we have to go to will require a infrastructure investment. So before we invest in that money, one of the reasons why we postponed this for a year, and we actually talked about this during the fire budget, is we've been heavily involved with regionalization. So what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to combine dispatch, spend, 6 figures on equipment, and then, within a year or so, find that regional dispatch is the way to go, and then we've had that sunk cost. I think we're realizing, and the final report has yet to come out, that regionalization, not just the effort that we're in, but the other efforts I see across the state, none of it's working. And other communities I've been talking for years and years and years, and it just, the incentives there, the quality of service is not at the par. So we'll definitely be pursuing options within our own city. And we actually said that it would take about 12 months. Probably about 4 months for the physical moving of equipment, and the other 6 to 8 months is likely going to be discussing with the union and making sure that all the details and the plans are set forth.
Councilor Reynolds.
I just also would like to state now that I won't be voting for this budget unless those 5 are in there already, and I really would like to see plans for hiring young people, so I would like to see the plans generated to restore it up to 80. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, councilors.
Moving forward, we go to City Clerk, City Council, License Commission, and Elections, pages 6 through 9. We'll start with, evening, Madam Clerk.
Evening.
We will start on page 6 with Legislative, City Council. City Council Personal Services, $99,000. Advertising, $8,000. And that's under City Council expenses. Advertising, $8,000. Office supplies, $1,875. Ordinance Code Supplement, $5,000. Brings the total of the two to $113,875. Madam Clerk.
I would just like to comment on the reduction in office supplies. As you know, we can overspend individual expense accounts as long as we stay within the bottom line for the total expense. And so far this year, as of today, we've got about $800 left in our advertising account, and we have overspent the code supplement, Mass General Law supplement account. So what happens when we fall short in one of those accounts is we can dip into the other and still wind up in the black at the end of the year. $625 doesn't sound like a lot of money. But when you're talking what the bottom line is in my budget, relatively speaking, it is a lot of money. So it's just something that just to be aware of, that I may run out of money along the way.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, you said the advertising budget only had $800 left?
with all of the advertising that has been done during this month. I haven't paid it yet.
So we've incurred over $3,000 of advertising costs in 1 month?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
When you have a lot of ordinances that have to be advertised, they really add up.
Because I was looking at Mr. Saracen's status through April, and we've only spent $4,000 out of the 8. But that's why I just wanted to...
Yeah, I went through all the ads and, yeah.
Okay. I also was discussing with, well, really wasn't discussing with anybody but myself.
What'd you say?
The city council stipends. I don't really know how to go forward with this with regard to other areas. I've actually drafted 4 petitions that I was going to submit tomorrow. One of the 4 I'm not really sure of right now because there are, I'll just say the first one is to freeze all department head salaries to the 2010 levels. But I'm hesitant to do that because there are several positions that are contractually obligated and there are some that aren't. And that can get a little sticky, but I don't know how we want to go forward with that. I might submit it anyway, just to have the discussion, and we can vote on it however we choose to have an ordinance change, if that's what we can do. But in addition to that, I have a petition to amend an ordinance to make our salary the same as 2010, as well as the mayor's, same as 2010, and to completely remove the stipend for the license commissioners. That last one, I'm fully in support of, as well as freezing the salary for the city councilors. We did it last year. I'd like to do it again this year, but again, I'm going to put these petitions forward so we can discuss what we want to do. But again, it's only $3,000 for us. But I just want to put it forward there for discussion. I'm probably going to submit it to you tomorrow.
Council, I do believe that the stipends for license commission are required by statute.
Required by statute?
I believe
Okay,
so. I believe so.
Okay.
I would want to double check on that.
That
but I
probably,
believe they are.
you're probably right, because it's the only commission or board that I know of that gets any kind of salary or any stipend,
correct.
except, planning doesn't, zoning board doesn't, council on aging does, there's a lot of them. Okay, so, good to know, I won't submit that one, but I would like to submit the first 3, which would include the council pay, and have my colleagues here discuss how we'd want to go forward with that, but I want to get the ball rolling on a discussion for that, so that's all I have to say for this. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy?
I was going to comment about the License Commission.
Councilor Reynolds?
I believe, Madam Clerk, that this is a moot question because I don't believe that our pay, council pay, or the mayor's pay can go up except in a election year, and this is not an election year.
Are you asking me if that's correct? or-
Yes.
I'd have to check on that, Counselor.
Please do.
Yeah, I will do that for you.
Any other questions regarding the city council budget? We'll move forward to the city clerk budget. City clerk personal services, subtotal of $218,175. City clerk expenses, $5,225, total of $223,400. Questions or comments? Councilor Joseph.
It just seems in the budgets that are $3 to $5 million, there's been no reduction in office supplies, and the budgets that are $100,000 or less, they all got their office supplies reduced. It just doesn't, I don't know why that they think that the people in those departments will use less office supplies this year, but police, fire, Board of Health, Public Works, none of those office supplies accounts went down, but things like the assessor's office, the treasurer's office, and the city clerk's budget went down. I guess, are you guys going to pool office supplies? Is there a plan on how this is supposed to happen? Is W.B. Mason going to cut you a deal or something? Or how's this going to work?
I'm not aware of any plan to pool office supplies, no. I do have a couple of comments about this also, I'd like to make when everyone's finished.
You go ahead and make those now, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
I'll give you that opportunity before I took questions.
That's quite all right. In regards to the cuts to office supplies, travel and meetings, dues and subscriptions, I know that when we're in rough financial shape, that travel and meetings are the first to go. But in the case of the city clerk's office, it's really important for me to stay on top of things, changes in the laws. They change election regulations on us all the time. We just have to stay on top of these things to make sure that the city is in compliance with a number of things. I figured out what I'm going to spend by the end of the year going to the city clerk's conferences, and I should have about $55 left at the end of the year. So basically what that means is I won't be able to attend all of the city clerk's conferences next year. Also, with the reduction to dues and subscriptions, I will most likely have to let go my certification as a certified municipal clerk because I will not be able to pay the dues for the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. That's not a huge deal, but many cities and towns do require their clerks to be certified. So it was something that I decided to do a few years back. I worked very hard to get that certification. I will have to let that go. And again, we can spend down within that expense category if we overrun certain things. The only place I've got left then to turn to would be the document restoration line item, which is woefully underfunded as it is. So that's where that leaves us.
Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. Just to comment on Councilor Joseph's statement about office supplies for the police, police have spent at or above what their office supplies have been budgeted for the last 4 years in a row. So, I mean, for me personally, that's why I didn't suggest any cuts on office supplies from them. City clerk is the same deal. I know I nitpicked on the law department last week about $750 here, $500 there, but that was because there have been several years where there hasn't been a penny spent against those accounts. They may have been spent somewhere else, but they weren't spent in those accounts. Here, it's different. Office supplies, travel and meetings, you've exceeded the budget for travel and meetings the last 4 years, and we're going to cut it. That doesn't make any sense to me. Dues and subscriptions, we've met or exceeded that budget, and we're cutting it. That doesn't make sense to me. Document and restoration, same deal. Doesn't make sense to me. This is the problem I have. It's small dollars, but there are a lot of departments in the city that are not getting cut, they're not being nitpicked with these kind of cuts, and they have nothing against them. But yours has a lot, and you're getting cut. So I agree with Councilor Joseph in a different way that it doesn't make sense to me that there are departments that have tremendous amounts of money left over, and the mayor can't find in the budget $250 to give you for travel and meetings and $700 to give you for office supplies. A very small example of why I don't approve of these budgets. It's ridiculous. Because the Board of Health, between the Board of Health and the Law Department, there's a recommendation for cuts of $200,000 already. And all you need is probably $1,000. Priorities here are really mixed up. I mean, I hope when the council votes for cuts, if we do, I hope we can make a recommendation to the mayor that she supplement your expense budget by $1,000, let's say. You should stay certified. I don't see how that would hurt us if you were certified still. I think it'll hurt us if you aren't. And travel and meetings, there are things you have to go to. There are some travel and meetings budgets that I would approve of cutting, but yours, you're not sitting on this money. I mean, and you have to spend it because there's things you gotta be at, so, to maintain certification on it. So that's what I'm gonna recommend at the end, that some of that money be moved to your area to supplant this, because it's grossly inadequate. One last question is your storage, downstairs, the vault. How filled to capacity is that?
It's overflowed into our basement area.
How much space do you have in the basement area?
We have a path that we can walk through to get to the bathroom.
Has there been any discussions about how we're going to correct this? Because, I mean, in your estimation, and maybe this is an unfair question, but how long do you think you have before that you don't have anywhere to put that stuff?
A year, maybe. It's very difficult to do research, retrieve documents that we're looking for now. I mean, you physically have to move boxes out of the way to get to things that are, 3 feet behind them.
It's really embarrassing that you don't have filing cabinets down there, or a section, like a library section, that just stores those documents. You gotta go down to a dank basement and search around. I mean, I can't see how that's efficient at all, but, okay, thank you.
Councilor Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Going to echo Councilor Di Natale's statement that your budget cannot be reduced. And I, for one, and I think others may join me, that cannot reduce the budget. With the open meeting law, the issues that are constantly coming up, you have to know what we can do, what each board can do, who can be there, and you keep us apprised of it, and I'm sure you do with all the other boards. And if you miss it, we're going to miss it. And if we, and I mean all the board members, if we miss it, the city is on the hook. And the bottom line is you are the first line of defense in keeping us appraised of the changes. And if we don't keep abreast of it, thanks to you, I think the entire city is at risk. So I think traveling and your dues and your membership should continue, and I'm opposed to any reduction in your budget. Thank you.
Councilor Caddy.
Mr. President, could you send the mayor a note asking her presence? She was here earlier, and now she's gone. We're making comments like this. I think it's very important for her to hear. I'd like her here listening to this budget.
Are you asking me to send her a note
Yes.
right now to get to,
Not
like
right
to recess
now.
while I go find? Okay, I didn't know if
Tomorrow
you-
would be just fine.
Okay.
When she's not here, she was here for the police budget. Is the clerk's office not as important?
Counselor, you don't have to convince
Okay.
me. This is the mayor's budget. As far as I'm concerned, the mayor should be sitting there every
Okay.
single time as opposed to the department heads. She's the one who put these numbers in.
And my point is, we're sitting here.
That's correct.
We're sitting here. I would like her presence.
I will,
And secondly, I'd like to reiterate, to restore the clerk's budget by $1,075. And then lastly, someone correct me if I'm wrong, to answer Councilor Reynolds' comment. It appears that the city council is getting a 3% raise. But in fact, we took a 3% cut last year during the budget sessions. That's why we have to cut it again, 3%, to be level funded from last year. But what in fact it was, we were getting paid, I don't know what it was, not much more, but we in fact cut ourselves. So it's not giving us a raise, it's just restoring something that we took away from ourselves a year ago. And if the council wants to reduce it back to that same number, so be it. But that's the explanation. We don't have to go through an election year. It was a cut. We have the right to cut anything, and we cut our own salaries last year.
I'd still like that verified by, yes.
Yeah, but that's what it was. Thank you.
Counselor Connery.
Yes, I believe, refresh my memory, I thought we passed last year some money to do something in the clerk's office, to try to correct the situation.
I think that was for the books. Did you do something the year before, a couple years ago?
I think it
Leanna?
was,
I did have $2,000 document restoration, which is almost gone for this year, but you mean additional to that? I think there was a petition referred to the mayor's office.
yes, there was. There was some type of petition referred to the mayor's office so that we could correct some of the situation that occurred, that was occurring in the clerk's office. I really don't know how Anna does it. She does a fantastic job, and, you know, it's a tough job, and I concur with my colleagues here that we should be sending the mayor a letter telling her that this budget probably should have more in it, but I guess we'll have to go along with level funding. But I really think that we need to give some attention to that office. Just walk in there sometime during an election. Well, you can't, really, can you? You know, she has boxes piled everywhere. It doesn't make a good impression for anybody coming into the city and walking into this city hall. She runs a tight ship. People that work for her do an excellent job, and probably second to the treasurer's office, the clerk's office probably is the busiest office in this building. So I agree with my colleagues 100% on this. Thank you.
Councilor Reynolds.
Madam Clerk, were these cuts that you made by request that you received from the mayor to either reduce your budget by a certain figure amount or a certain percentage?
I did not make these cuts, Counselor. No.
These figures came from the mayor, not from you?
That's correct.
Well, she just, oh my goodness. I think that they're totally inappropriate. I certainly think there should be restoration. You should certainly get whatever travel expenses are needed. It's clear to all of us, really and truly, that you're on overload and doing an excellent job. I also wanted to ask you, have you ever come back to the council to ask for further funding, as do other departments?
I have once, last year, when we had 2 special elections scheduled that were not anticipated.
And that weren't in the budget?
That were not in the budget, that's correct.
No, but that was clearly not something. Have you any other time? Only once you've ever come back and asked for?
That's correct.
Well, you know, that's something that every other department has learned to do. And if they underfund deliberately to look good on the budget line, they come back and make requests for what they feel is necessary. So, I mean, that is a possibility. But this is inadequate, and again, is a further reason not to vote for this budget. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions regarding the city clerk's office? And then we'll move forward to page 8, elections. Election personal services, $31,950. Election expenses, $29,000. Total elections, $60,950. Comments or questions? Councilor Conry.
Mrs. Farrell, how come we are down 43% on election workers? Why was that cut from 29 to 22? In FY10, of course, I know there was an extra election in FY10, but are you going to be able to pay 78 election workers with $29,000?
Actually, there's a problem with these numbers. If I could explain. There's a problem with a couple of the numbers. The $29,286 is actually over the amount that should be in that line item. I need a total of about $24,240. we have 2 state elections. The number was very high last year because we had the additional elections. And we've also had to do a little shifting around with how we pay a couple of people. You'll notice that the overtime account has been completely zeroed out. That's a problem, because I used to pay everybody out of the election workers line item, including the setup crew. And one of the things I learned at a city clerk's conference is that it could possibly have been deemed an ethics violation to be paying a couple of the people that already work for the city to set up the polling locations. I have 2 wonderful people who work in the building department who know the setup routine inside and out. I don't even have to think about it. They just take it from me, and they do their thing, and everything is done perfectly. You can't get paid from 2 separate departments when you work for the city. And so we rearranged things. We now have an overtime account. They start work after 3 o'clock when they leave their building department job, and they work overtime doing the election setup. We are paying them correctly through the overtime account, and we're going to have to do something about that, because I don't want to have to get other people to do my setup work. They'd be very difficult to replace.
How much would you need in the overtime account?
I had originally submitted a request for $2,000.
So, if I can just ask Madam Clerk to follow up, if you reduce the 29,286 to 24,240, and you add $2,000 to the overtime line, your bottom number of 31,950 would still be reduced. Is that correct?
Yes, it would. I basically need 22,240 in the election worker line item and $2,000 in overtime for a grand total of 24,240. I'm not sure where that 29,286 came from.
Okay.
I think that was an old number that had been, that was a total for a prior fiscal year.
I will bring it to the mayor's attention, and hopefully we can...
Yeah.
Councilor Di Vitale.
Thank you. This goes to what Councilor Caddy said about the mayor not being here. I have a suspicion that the mayor didn't discuss this at the end with you, Madam Clerk, or else that would have been addressed. Going back to what I said earlier at the start of the session, that I question if most of the department heads, they may have given input 3 months ago, but they never heard from her again after that. I mean, you're telling us that you have more than you need, which I've never heard any of the department heads say, so you score points with me right away with that comment, but it probably could have resolved this before the mayor submitted the package, and I'm guessing, I'm gonna state the probability that it didn't happen because you weren't met on these numbers when we got them. Is anybody surprised by that? I'm not. So that's point number 1. Point number 2 is the $3,000 that would be left over. Again, budget reallocation here. Some of that $3,000 can go to your expense account in the city clerk's office. Again, that could have been rectified before we got this package. So if we're going to make a recommendation to cut $5,000, or, I mean, either that or the mayor will submit a transfer, but either way, there's going to be a net of $3,000. Again, I think on our list of recommendations, we should lobby the mayor to move 1,000 to 1,500 of that into your city clerk expense account, and then we'll hold on to the other 1,500. But I mean, problem solved. But what really irks me, and the mayor is not here, is this makes me believe that these numbers weren't vetted with you before we got them, or else this would have been caught. That's a big problem. Thank you.
Any other questions on the election budget? Now we'll move forward to page 9, license.
Excuse me,
commission.
Mr. President.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could I just make a couple more comments? There's a couple other line items that
Oh,
I'd just
I'm
like to
sorry.
bring to your attention. Sorry, lost my train of thought. The voting equipment and maintenance, that is overfunded also. That 16,400 is a figure that had been reached in prior years, but the reason it had gone so high is because I had to make a one-time purchase that was $9,400 for new vote tabulation software. And also, it can get that high in years of municipal elections when we have to purchase our own ballots. As elections go, this year, we get off pretty cheap because it's a state election. We don't have to pay for the ballots. My original submission to the mayor was actually $4,000. So we could get away with quite a bit less. And also, the office supplies line item is going to be really tight. The terminology probably is bad. Office supplies, it's not true office supplies. It's not paper and pens and paper clips. When we're talking elections, office supplies is actually includes, for example, food for the poll workers. It's the rental truck that we use to drive around to all the polls with all the booths and whatnot. It's the gasoline for the rental truck. It's vote here signs. It's all that kind of stuff. And in 2009, we spent over $5,000 in that account. And this year, well, this isn't a good year to look at. It was almost $13,000, $12,500, because we had the extra elections. But that's going to be really, that's going to be tight. The number I proposed was $4,500. So it was cut by $500. So I just wanted to bring those two items to your attention.
Councilors, if everybody deems it's appropriate, we can either have a discussion now, or myself and the clerk can sit down with the mayor to try to redo this budget and have it brought back with the appropriate changes. Councilor Di Natale.
Thank you. This question is to the mayor. Ms. Mayor, the city clerk just told us that she requested $4,000 for voting equipment and maintenance. Why did you submit a budget for $16,400 if she only requested $4,000?
These were numbers that I asked my finance team to review. So if they made changes, then I need to discuss it with them.
Councilor Caddy.
Your suggestion, could you please do that, because there's more money in this budget than is needed.
It'll be done immediately.
Thank you. One other question. Because of that, and I know we're looking for money everywhere, would you have the discussion about her document and restoration line, and possibly up that a little bit for her? Thank you.
Moving forward to page 9, License Commission. License Board Personal Services, $6,200. License Board Expenses, $2,450. Total, $8,650. Any questions? Councilor Reynolds.
I read the report of the License Commission, and there's some question about a liquor license going from Fitchburg and being sold to Leominster. Does the city get any money for that?
I'm not familiar with that at all, Counselor.
Of some individual selling his liquor license and it going to a Leominster business? You're not familiar with that at all?
That would not happen.
Yeah, that can't happen. The liquor license.
Did I read it incorrectly when I read the minutes of the License Commission report?
Possibly.
I believe it was Mr. Hoover.
Maybe the name of the Buffalo Wild Wings restaurant, their LLC, for some reason, is called has Leominster in it for some reason. I don't know why, but it's definitely not going to Leominster. It's staying in Fitchburg. It's going up at Kmart Plaza. Yeah, it's not going to Leominster.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding the License Commission? Motion is second to adjourn. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Council Joseph.
Wait a minute. In light of the discussions that we've had over the past 3 sessions, I guess I'd just like to throw out there to make a motion to reject the budget, mainly because I don't want to sit here and waste my time night after night on a budget that the department heads aren't signing off on. My recommendation, if I could make the motion to sign off the budget, would be until we saw a complete reorganization plan, till we saw a CDBG accountability plan, till we see department heads' signatures on the bottom of each one of their department budgets, and we see the police department properly funded. I don't want to come every night and hear everybody say, I'm not going to vote for this budget, I'm not going to vote for this budget. This is the time to say, we're not going to vote for this budget. Let's have a show of hands. If not, we'll move on and see if we've got a 6-5 or whatever going on. But I don't want to get through this whole process of, I'm not going to vote for this budget, I'm not going to vote for this budget, and then at the end, not vote for the budget and not have any reconciliation before that point. So I would like to make a motion that we reject the budget.
I'll second that. And speaking on the motion, please.
1 second. We have a motion and a second to reject the mayor's fiscal year 2011 budget. Councilor Caddy.
Mr. President, could you get together with the mayor as soon as possible and see if you can iron some of these things out and see if we can stay on schedule with our budget? Thank you.
Councilor Conley.
Mr. President, vote to reject the budget will be to return the budget to the mayor's office, correct?
No. Vote to reject the budget would be a vote to reject the budget.
Thank you.
Speaking to the motion, I personally would prefer, if we were going to take a vote and just stop the process at this point, to return the budget to the mayor's office. That's not rejecting it, that's returning it to the mayor's office. The mayor then has the ability to bring it back to the council. If we reject it, it has been rejected.
Change your motion.
Well, I understand my colleagues' concerns.
I've heard 1, 2, 3, 4 councilors already say they're going to reject the budget at the end. I don't want to wait till the end. If that's 4 out of 7, maybe there's 3 more, 2 more, then we're wasting our time rejecting or sending. I'll make a motion to send the budget, amend the motion to send the budget back to the mayor's office.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to send the 2011 proposed budget from the mayor back to the mayor. Speaking to the motion, Councilor Solomito.
Thank you, Mr. President. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if we send the budget back to the mayor, and the mayor does not respond within 10, 15, 20 days, and I don't think there's any dictating time for her to return another budget, then what happens at the end of the fiscal year goes under what they call continuing resolution, that the budget goes on a month-to-month basis, as it is right now. And there is no new budget, so the old budget remains in effect, and that's when I talked to Mr. Ciotta. We go on a continuing month-to-month of the old budget. As a result, the mayor is not mandated to return a new budget within 10 days, 20 days, 30 days. She was mandated to give us a budget by May 15th, and she did that. Is she mandated to give us a new budget within a specific period of time? No, she's not. She may take time, she may take 10 days, but she may take a month or 2 months. I just want the council to know that after June 30th, if to my understanding, the budget continues in the same budget that we have right now, with no new changes. Is that correct?
Essentially, correct.
So as long as everybody understands that there's not going to be any mandate to the mayor to get back a new budget, she may, but she's not required to within a specific period of time. And this council has absolutely no authority, if I read the law correctly, to mandate that she get it back and do something right away. We may then be sitting on our hands. Part of me says, yeah, I'm not thrilled with the budget, but part of me says it's our obligation to the taxpayers to sit here and discuss it. And if we can find money, fine, and if we can't find money, that's fine too. And if we disagree with what the mayor has proposed, that's fine too. But it's our obligation, and I'm not thrilled about coming here every night if I think it's a waste of time, but that's my obligation, and that's something I took upon myself. It might be frustrating, but I don't think after this is the third day of a budget hearing, not to reject it, but to send it back. I do think we have an obligation to look at it, to discuss it. At the end of the budget period, if we don't come to a resolution, then I would be more in favor of sending it back to the mayor, if that's what the majority of the members wanted to do. But I think this may be a little premature to send it back at this time. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could just ask for one clarification. At the end of the process, this body has the options of either accepting the budget, rejecting the budget, or taking no action on the budget. And if we take no action on the budget, it simply means that this body does not approve of that budget, but that it becomes the budget come July 1st. If we send the proposed budget back to you, and you were to take no other action in not send something back to the council as a new budget, is that the same as this body taking no action in this budget would ultimately become the budget?
I don't know that answer for sure. That would have to be verified with the city solicitor, but I believe that is a risk and a possibility.
That's one of my concerns, that, I don't have a problem. In the past, on a few years, the council has taken no action intentionally on the budget, and it's become the budget, not with our blessing. But I hate to send this back to the mayor now, and if she chooses to take no action, then that is ultimately what occurs. So I'd like to talk to the city solicitor and get that, before I would vote to do anything tonight, to get an answer for that. Not that I'm opposed to sending it back, not that I'm opposed to rejecting it at this point, but I would like clarification, because I wouldn't want this body to get caught. Councilor Reynolds.
Can you just clarify the time frame when Councilor Joseph suggests that we return it? Well, the amendment was to return it to the mayor because we can foresee that it will be rejected as is. What is the time frame there? How much longer are we studying this budget that it must, before the state mandate that it be, we make a decision on it?
We need to take an action before July 1st.
Before July 1st.
Or if we take no action, then it becomes the budget.
All right, so we have a whole month.
That's correct.
Well, I think there's a wisdom to what Councilor Joseph is saying, because I presume on the mayor's goodwill to work. We're trying to work with her, and we're working on behalf of the people. I believe that she has goodwill and will work with us. I don't foresee that we get into a head-to-head conflict. I think she can clearly see that we have serious questions, and I think it's a bit of wisdom for Councilor Joseph to suggest that we use this time well to come up with a budget that we can both live with.
Councilor Caddy.
If I had to vote on the budget tonight, I'd vote no because of what we heard with the clerk's office, my worries about CDGB, my worries about the police. The Board of Health situation, possibly being the boss of a building commissioner, I mean, I seriously have some problems with the management part of what's happening with the city. So if I had to vote tonight, I'd vote no. I would honestly vote no, and Councilor Joseph is right on the button. Let's have our president meet with the mayor. Let's iron out some of these things. I hope the mayor listens and works with us. I don't want to not vote for the budget. I want to work together with the mayor's office, but I got some very serious concerns, and this one tonight probably just looks like an oversight. But certainly the clerk was nice enough to bring it to our attention.
If I could ask Councilor Joseph a question, might you be amenable, because I am concerned about either rejecting it or sending it back tonight until I talk to the city solicitor to clarify that. This body could certainly vote to suspend any discussions and hearings on the budget until I get an answer from the city solicitor and I can talk to the mayor regarding some of these issues to see if she would bring something back.
Out of the 4 recommendations that I made, only one of them involves money. The other 3 don't even involve money. All I'm looking for is a reorganization chart and plan to show who's working for who, where, and the CDBG accountability, who's doing what, who's responsible for talking to making sure that reports go out. The department heads sign off their budget. None of these things involve money. And then I guess the 4th one, she's agreed that we can work together to figure out how we would fund some kind of police officers, whether it be through dispatchers, civilian dispatchers, or police officers, or something that we could come to an agreement on within next week, before our next budget session, which is next Tuesday. But I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to continue on until June 30th, because you know the answer to the question as well as I know the answer to the question. We can accept it, we can reject it and go on a 1/12 budget, or we can take a no action and this budget goes into effect. There's our 3 options. We know what they are. I don't have to ask the city solicitor. I've heard it 9 times.
If we return it to the mayor, is that taking no action and she doesn't have to do anything and it becomes the budget? That Councilor Reynolds.
I must say that I have no faith in the city solicitor's suggestion to you. I'm sorry to say that, but based upon how I've seen him behave to date, I personally have no faith in what he would tell you. I believe he would be the mayor's solicitor and give some statement, and that this council would be unduly swayed by what he had to say. So I would reject that. I think that this body can stand on our own 2 feet, make a decision, and speak up.
Councilor Connery.
I concur with Councilor Joseph. I think, I can't imagine that if we return the budget to the mayor's office and you had a discussion with the mayor, I can't imagine that the mayor wouldn't resubmit it. That's only my personal feeling. I don't think she's that kind of a person. I don't totally disagree. I'm not too happy about the comment about the city solicitor, because the city solicitor is bound by the statutes and the rules and regulations of the state and of our city ordinances. Some people have a personal axe to grind with him, but I think he is fair. And I think that you would get an answer that follows the general laws of the Commonwealth and the ordinances of the city of Fitchburg. I agree with you, Councilor Joseph. I think it should go back.
Councilor Di Natale.
I'm all set.
Madam Mayor.
A couple of things. First is, absolutely would I be willing to work with the city council. I think we can say that these are unprecedented times. When I wrote the initial letter to the council at the beginning of this calendar year stating that we had a $4.2 million deficit, I stated then that this was going to be a difficult budget session, that I wasn't sure if I could put together a budget that didn't have a serious amount of layoffs or significant fee increases. So I know that we've been working hard until the last minute. It's always hard when you're making significant changes. So we've been, for example, scouring our, things like the debt service. We cut about $180,000 out of there. I mean, those were things that we were working on until the very last minute, just to prevent layoffs. If those couldn't happen, if we had no's for an answer on a number of those items, then unfortunately we would have had to cut a significant amount of people. So we did the best that we can. In that initial letter, I did suggest that we start working with the council right away, that I wanted a city council liaison. I've had many conversations with various councilors regarding issues that you're bringing up tonight. Maybe those private conversations where you're bringing up questions during this budget process that we've actually brought up privately. So if these private conversations aren't answering your questions, I need to know that. Because like I said, there's no formal process to include the council prior to my submission. So maybe, again, these informal conversations and inviting you to our various meetings were not sufficient to your satisfaction. So in terms of how we move forward, I think we need to clearly outline a way that we would work things out. So, for example, I've given various suggestions on how to move forward, but a lot of those suggestions I can't move forward unilaterally on. And because I hear it from one city councilor doesn't necessarily mean that there's support from a majority. I mean, that's hard to figure out. So if somebody wants one area cut, but everybody else doesn't support that, or somebody wants, DPW versus police. I mean, if you send the budget back to me now, obviously police is going to be a top priority. But like I said, in past year's budgets, there's been a lot of harping about DPW, that which I agree on. So, the process could happen simultaneously. I'm here to get your input on how exactly you would like to do that. Or if you would like just to informally send it back to me without making an official rule, and maybe simultaneously continue with your budget sessions, but take a look at any revisions that we might make or suggestions we might make. And then at that time, if you, for example, like what you see in a secondary budget, then at the same time you could make the motion to maybe suspend one and adopt the other, instead of saying, gee, we suspended one, but we're not sure when when we're going to see another budget or what's going to be in that budget. So I'm just sort of trying to lay down some parallel paths that can take place.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, if I could just ask for a clarification. Since we are meeting tonight as a council as a whole committee, any actions that we take would need to be reported to the full council at our next meeting for them to vote on. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Councilor Reynolds.
I think that the mayor has struck a conciliatory note there, because there are items that we do have to look into the rest of the budget that are serious, and that perhaps it would be best for us simultaneously to continue there. Having already spoken and said to the mayor that we will reject it based on what we've already seen, if she's true to her word, which I would assume she would be, but beyond assumption, there has to be some kind of recognition that this is an agreed upon thing action on the council, that in lieu of what we've seen already, this budget is due for rejection by several councilors. We haven't had a hand vote yet by how many, which I think would probably be a wise thing to take. And that to send it back, those portions that we've already worked on.
If you could clarify for me, Council, what do you mean a wise thing to take?
Well, I think it would be, Councilor Joseph noted, he counted, 4 or 5 of us that have already spoken out and said we would reject it based on what we've already seen. Mm-hmm. So perhaps we could have a show of hands of how many of us feel that way. The mayor would then know that it was going to be ultimately rejected.
Are you asking to have a vote without having a vote?
No, we can call it a vote, an official vote. To send it back, but simultaneously continue on to review the rest of her budget.
Councilor Joseph.
That is, excuse me, did I say that correctly, what you suggested, a simultaneous?
The simultaneous process that I recommended is that you obviously continue to retain the right to reject and the right to send it back to me, but that we, in parallel, continue on the side with, I guess, negotiations to figure out what the best avenue is to address the concerns that all of you have. Because the concerns that you have are concerns that I have. It's just, we have to figure out the best avenue to address those concerns. So what's given up to gain things that you're looking at funding for the next fiscal year?
To the president, could we vote to send it back, based on what we already know, and still continue our budget hearings for the other departments that we haven't reviewed yet?
If we've sent this budget back to the mayor, we would suspend budget hearings until we received something back from her.
There's no in-between there? Is that right, Madam Clerk?
I would agree with the president, yes.
Councilor Joseph.
I am in no way saying that this budget is not a piece of art. This budget is something that you take a couple of $1 million deficit and you put it into 56 pages and say, this is how we're going to run the city next year with the minimum amount of pain. Okay, so I'm not saying that this budget wasn't crafted properly, okay, because it's doing the best with what you have. Okay, and I don't want to in any way say that this isn't a sound budget, but there are some major concerns that I have that we've discussed. I'm not saying anything that we haven't talked about privately, okay, that I want to see on paper. So I'm not saying that, and like I said, only one of my suggestions evolves around money, because that's what I hear is the one that's going to reject the budget the most. And I don't want to sit here night after night hearing, I'm not going to vote for this budget, I'm not going to vote for this budget, get to June 30th and not have any reconciliation, okay? Because we've just continued to say, I'm not going to vote for the budget, and then the discussions continue, and June 30th comes around and we take no action, and the budget goes through. That's my concern, is that we continue to say that we're not going to vote for the budget, and yet no reconciliation is happening on some of the items. So it's, at what point do we do this so that it becomes a meaningful exercise in coming here on Tuesdays and Wednesdays for the next 6 weeks to make sure that we get a good budget? It's a budget committee, if that's what you want to call it. This is your chance to work with the council.
Move to take the vote.
Budget committee.
Councilor Connery.
Yes. Councilor Renner's suggestion of taking a straw poll, I would direct my question to the city clerk. I would assume that kind of borders on a violation of the open meeting law, would it not? If we took a straw poll, I would vote against that.
Councilor, I didn't recommend a straw poll. I recommended a vote.
Because I'll rescind my motion and just ask...
Move the motion.
One second.
Rescind my motion and just ask that we get some clarification or better information on the items that we've asked for. I'm just one. If there's other things that people want to ask for before the next meeting, speak up, and then we'll go for next Tuesday on.
Okay, so you're rescinding your motion?
Yes.
Councilors, I will meet with the mayor. I will discuss the 4 topics that Councilor Joseph addressed. I will also address the city clerk's budget, as we discussed earlier.
Motion to adjourn.
Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Can I just make a recommendation? I mean, some things can be discussed behind the scenes, but To facilitate the process, I'd like to recommend that during the Tuesday meeting on the agenda, that we put a presentation about the reorganization on the agenda,
We can do that.
so that that's done for the full council.
We can do that.
Great.
I have a motion to adjourn.